Okay, class, we're now ready to start talking about the dermis. Before we do, we want to talk about the basement membrane, which in dermatology could also be called the dermal epidermal junction. The dermal epidermal junction. The basement membrane in the skin is composed of a basal lamina on top of a reticular lamina. It's a two-layered deal, a basal lamina on top of a reticular lamina. This is a strong basement membrane. The basement membrane prevents cancer of the epidermis from metastasizing so it can't get into lymphatics or blood vessels. So as long as you have a skin cancer that stays in the epidermis area, now remember the cancer would have to be in the stratum basale or the stratum spinosum, because you can't have cancer of dead cells, but it can't spread. So if you catch it early, you're in good shape. Now remember, the stratum basale cells are firmly attached to the base by hemidesmosomes. If you break that, that's the blister. So that's the DE junction. Okay, that's the DE junction. Okay, the dermis is a strong, flexible, loose, and dense connective tissue. There are two layers of the dermis. Now the cells in the dermis are the fibroblasts. Remember, these are the cells that produce collagen. That's the cells: macrophages, mast cells, inflammation, and some white blood cells. Loose connective tissue, but it's really, we have loose and dense. The two layers of the dermis, the upper layer is the papillary layer. It's the upper fifth of the dermis. And the bottom 4/5 is the reticular. Let me say it again. The upper 1/5 is the papillary, and the bottom part, is the reticular. Now I want to bring this up. The reticular layer is the strength layer of the skin. The reticular layer is the strength layer of the skin. Now if I'm looking at my abdomen, it's not the strength layer of my whole body wall, because that's the deep fascia. That's the deep fascia. So let's go through. We have an epidermis, then we have a dermis, then we have a hypodermis, which was also called the superficial fascia, and then we have a deep fascia. That's the strength layer of the body wall. But remember again, only the epidermis and dermis are part of the skin, the integumentary layer. The papillary layer, which is the upper 1/5, is loose connective tissue. The reticular layer is the strength layer. It's a dense, irregular connective tissue. Dense, irregular. That means the fibers, again, irregular, go back to chapter 4, are going in all different directions to give that strength. So that's the dermis. That's the dermis. That's also where the blood vessels are in the dermis. Okay. So here would be what we're looking at. All right. Now, when we get to, we're going to go here now. So the epidermis, okay, check this out. The dermis folds and makes the epidermis fold. Let me say it again. The dermis folds and makes the epidermis fold. The dermis folds and makes the epidermis fold. The purpose of that folding is this. I kind of made this little drawing here. If the epidermis was flat, and then you had the basement membrane, and the dermis was flat, it would be too easy to pull the epidermis off the dermis. But what you have in this bottom drawing I just did is a peg and socket. That means by interdigitating the epidermis and the dermis, it holds it in tighter. See how this interdigitation? So it's a peg and socket. The dermis makes the epidermis fold. Okay, so here's the terminology. If we were looking at the slides, this bend down of the epidermis here is called an epidermal ridge. This bend down here, some call it a reedy ridge. This upshoot of the dermis kind of into the epidermis would be called the dermal papillae. The dermal papillae. So this would be, if I was using this, it would be an epidermal ridge, and that upshoot of the dermis up would be the dermal papillae. Epidermal ridge, because that's epidermis, dermal papillae. Okay. All right. Papillae means kind of like a tip. Okay. So again, the dermis causes the epidermis to fold. The dermis causes, and that allows a tighter hold between the dermis and the epidermis. So we go further. So we talked about the reticular layer. Collagen fibers produce strength and resiliency, but you also have elastic fibers. See, elastic fibers give elasticity. Let's look at what I mean. Okay, so a lady has a kid. The abdomen gets big, but it just stretches the elastic fibers. Okay, so when the kid is born, the skin gets tight again. However, if the size of the kid inside her is too big and it breaks some of the elastic fibers, then when she's no longer pregnant, she gets stretch marks because you don't get the elasticity to come back. The elasticity. Now that's true also. I hate to say this, but here it goes. Let's take somebody that's 18. Let's take a person 18. Let's say a lady 18 versus a lady 28. Okay. When you look at them, because they both are young, the skin is going to be nice and tight and everything. Nice and tight. So it'll be hard if the person kept themselves in good shape at 28 to really say, oh, you look like you're 18 or 19. Here's a little test though. If you take the skin in the back of the hand and you pull up on it, the 18-year-old, the skin is going to pop down quick. The 28 is going to pop quicker than somebody 40, obviously, but it's not going to pop down as fast as the person 18 because you've lost a little bit of that elasticity, just to show you. All right, we go a little further. So skin markings, what we call dermatoglyphics, because the dermis makes the epidermis fold, that's where you get these fingerprints and sole prints because of this. Because the dermis made the epidermis fold. That's where that comes in, the folding of the skin. Okay? We go a little further. Now, on the body surface, though, you get these things we're going to call cleavage lines, are also called Longer's lines, from the guy that first described them. Cleavage lines are Longer's lines. Now let me show you what this is of importance in medicine, particularly in surgery and so forth. If we do an incision on the skin and we cut with the Longer's lines, the skin will heal with less scarring. I'm saying it again. The skin will heal with less scarring. So that's why, let's say in OBGYN work, we would do the bikini cut. The bikini cut. Because when we finish and sew it back up, there would be less scarring. However, because of us having to look extensively sometimes in the abdomen for general surgery, you have to go up and down. You have no choice. You'd love to have the aesthetics of being able to do that nice bikini cut, but you can't because of the medical necessity to get more exposure. But again, with the Longer's lines, cleavage lines, plastic surgeons use that when they're doing certain things to prevent scarring if they have to. So all of this is due, though, to the dermis making the epidermis fold quite a bit. Okay? All right. So we go further then. Now we're to the appendages of the skin. The appendages of the skin, which would be the sweat glands, the oil glands, the hair, and the nails. I think what I'm going to do is start another video now, and we'll start on the appendages of the skin. All right. Thank you.